A few months ago, I wrote a video for the channel Cypher that now has over 2.2 million views. It's called The Last 24 Hours on Death Row, but this isn't your average true crime video. In fact, it's probably the only YouTube video of its kind, and in just a second, you'll see why. Today, I'm breaking down this video scene by scene to show you how I wrote and structured it, why it went viral, and what you can take from it to improve your own videos. So, let's watch it together.
It's December 18th, 2024. In the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, a guard approaches one of the 200 cells in death row and finds a prisoner inside sitting on the edge of his bed. It's 10 a.m. Kevin Ray Underwood has 24 hours left to live.
So when I said that this is the only YouTube video of its kind, this is why. A lot of YouTube documentaries start out with a date, and this one does as well, December 18th, 2024. But if you actually look at when this video was uploaded, it's December 19th, and this isn't a coincidence. The guy we mentioned in the video, Kevin Ray Underwood, actually was executed on the 19th of December, and that's really one of the core pillars of the idea of the video. Obviously, now that a lot of time has passed, you would need to be paying attention to notice this, but there's a few people who do, and their reaction is basically, holy shit. But let's keep going.
Not every state in the US allows or uses the death penalty. The ones that do all have different execution protocols. But generally speaking, the timeline of events is similar with slight differences in the details. This is what happens in the last 24 hours on death row.
One of the most important parts of making a successful YouTube video is retention. But because of that, you've probably heard a ton of advice of all of the different retention tactics that you can use to keep people in. But think about it. The main reason that people are going to click off of your video isn't because you're not bombarding them with dopamine. It's because they're confused. Your YouTube video could literally be boring, but if it's clear, it has a better chance of keeping people watching than a confusing video with a lot of stimulation. There are two main ways to make your script clear. First of all, you don't use fancy words, you don't use fancy phrases, you use language that most people will understand. But a second and often overlooked way to do this is to create a clear structure for your video. In this death row video, it was actually a very challenging obstacle because it's a very complex topic. In the US, the death penalty isn't like a single thing. Not every state uses it, and the ones that do all have different protocols. So if I tried to cover every variation, it would have been a confusing mess. So instead, what I did here is I wrote this line. Not every state in the US allows or uses the death penalty. The ones that do all have different execution protocols, but generally speaking, the timeline of events is similar with slight differences in the details. People have to know exactly what they're getting into. In the case of this death row video, it's a general timeline of events. When a viewer has clarity about what they're getting into, that honestly does 90% of the work. And then those retention tactics make your video exciting on top of that, but they're not the foundation. Clarity and structure has to come first. Let's see what happens next.
Kevin Ray Underwood is a death row inmate at Oklahoma State Penitentiary. 34 days ago, he was strip searched and x-rayed for any tools with which he could hurt himself, and then relocated from the prison's A unit to its H unit.
So at this point in the script, we bring Kevin Ray Underwood back. By using Underwood as a character in this video, we give the audience somebody to attach themselves to. And that is much more powerful than just abstract information about how the death row protocol works. But interestingly, you can see here that we just dive straight into the protocol. We didn't say what Underwood did yet. And again, very intentional choice. This does two interesting things. First, it's a curiosity gap. Anyone watching is naturally going to wonder, what did this guy do? Why is he in death row? But secondly, and most importantly, this gives the viewers more time to walk in Underwood's shoes without judging him. In the video, I did actually mention what Underwood did, but it's only in the very end. It's actually at minute 17. And this is gonna give them the space to feel what they would feel if they were in their last 24 hours. They'll contemplate how he feels, and in some cases, they might even empathize with him. And then you'll see what happens. That all comes crashing down. For now, let's keep watching.
When they reach their destination, the inmate steps out of the vehicle. This is the last time they see sunlight and breathe fresh air. Now the prisoner gets escorted into the death house and is taken into a cell just a few steps away from the execution chamber.
So from here on out, the video is basically a walkthrough of what happens in the death row protocol. You can tell from the comments that there's this sense of dread that builds up. But the thing is, if you actually read the writing itself, it's not dramatic, it's not tragic or dreadful. In fact, the writing of the video itself is pretty plain. So that obviously begs the question, like, then why is this video so emotional? And the answer actually is because of what's not in the script. This is actually a writing technique from Ernest Hemingway. He called it the theory of omission, or these days it's also known as the iceberg method. The idea is that with an iceberg, you only see the tip, but the heavy and dangerous part is below the surface. So Hemingway's philosophy was that good writing should only show the tip, because the smaller the tip of an iceberg is, it means it's heavier. In terms of writing, this means that you only show what's happening, but all the interpretations, all the themes and emotions, you don't actually put them into words. Instead, they're left below the surface for the reader to interpret on their own. Like, for example, we ended that last part with, "This is the last time they see sunlight and breathe fresh air." That's just a fact. There's no dressing up that sentence with dramatic or dreadful or tragic language. But underneath the surface, the audience feels that sinking feeling of dread in their chest. And so what the iceberg theory is trying to tell us is that you can divide your writing in basically two parts. There's the text, the tip of the iceberg, and then there's your subtext, which is everything that's below the surface. The rule to follow here is that the more text you use, the more subtext you lose. And here's why. The second you start injecting emotional language into a script like this, that means you're telling people how to feel. But when you only present the truth, the very tip of the iceberg, then everything below the surface belongs to the viewer. And that's why the writing of this video is so dead simple. It opens up the space for the viewer to feel and think and form their own opinions. If you want to see another example of this, just look at the part where Underwood has his one chance to be exempted from the execution.
With 15 minutes until his execution, Underwood is staring at the phone on the wall. At any moment, the warden could receive a call from the governor's office, letting him know that Underwood has been granted a stay of execution. If important new evidence about his case is found or the courts approve a last-minute appeal, the execution could be delayed. If his sentence is suddenly changed to life in prison, it could be cancelled altogether.
After this, there's a part about his final statement, but then we come back to the telephone.
After his statement is over, Underwood turns his head to face the telephone again. It never rings.
As you can see, I don't write about the haunting silence of the telephone. I just say, literally, it never rings. It's just the surface truth of what happened. But because the writing doesn't tell you what to feel, you actually end up feeling it more. But let's keep watching. At this point in the video, we are at 0 minutes until the execution. And here we show this device, which is basically the mechanism that is going to deliver the chemicals and the lethal injection into Underwood's body. As someone who writes YouTube videos, I always have to remind myself that YouTube is an audio-visual medium. Nobody's going to read what I write. They're not going to listen to it either. They're going to see it. So the words in your script have to be written for the eye. Here, we are calling attention to this physical thing that you can see, that you need your eyes to understand. And that visual specificity keeps people glued to the screen. Now we're getting into some of the most interesting parts of this script. So let's keep going. So this is the part where you're watching the manifold at work, which means you're watching the execution. What's interesting about this part is that it literally could have been reduced to like 5 sentences. I could have simply written something like, the first drug knocks him unconscious, the second one paralyzes him, the third one gives him a heart attack, and then he dies. And technically, that would have explained what happens in the lethal injection. What I did in this section, instead of just saying what effects the drug have, I show exactly how they work. I describe the dosages, the administration method, how quickly the drugs traverse throughout his body. And then I get into in greater detail about what happens biologically. How do the drugs affect Underwood's body? In the second one, I explain biologically how it essentially suffocates him from the inside out. The third drug, I talk about how that drug increases the electrical activity inside Underwood's body and how eventually that leads to cardiac arrest. And again, what's happening here also has to do with the iceberg theory. I just describe in plain terms what the chemicals are doing, and it creates this sinking feeling of dread in people's chest. But it's that combination, the visual specificity delivered with total objectivity, that creates this effect. So now let's see what happened when Underwood dies.
The exact time of day when executions take place in the U.S. varies. But in the H Unit of Oklahoma State Penitentiary, Kevin Ray Underwood will be pronounced deceased around 10 a.m. on December 19th, 2024, the day of his 45th birthday. Depending on when you're watching, this could be a few minutes from now or years ago.
So in the moment where Underwood dies, there are 2 really important things happening. First, we dropped a curveball out of basically nowhere that this happened on his 45th birthday. And the second thing is that we remind the audience of the timing of this upload. I call these 2 things emotional amplifiers. They're basically these pieces of information that you can insert in a very emotional part of a video, and they'll just amplify the emotion. The rule that I follow is that I want to delay using these pieces of information as much as possible. It's like that quote from Succession: information is like a bottle of fine wine. You store it, you hoard it, you save it for a special occasion, and then you smash someone's fucking face in with it. That's basically what I'm doing with this information. Just hearing that somebody was executed on their birthday has this tragic irony that makes you go like, what the fuck? But let's keep going because the best part of the video is honestly coming up.
Kevin Ray Underwood was the last person to be executed in the United States in 2024. He was sentenced to death in 2008 for the first-degree murder of a 10-year-old girl. Her name was Jamie Rose Boland.
So coming out of the execution scene, the audience has been through an emotional roller coaster. This is the part where we reveal what Underwood did. And it just so happens that in order to end up in death row, you can't commit just any crime. You need to have done something remarkably evil. In this case, Underwood murdered an innocent 10-year-old girl and then went on to do things that are so horrible that I'm not even gonna mention them. But what's happening here in the video, structurally, is that essentially they've been walking in Underwood's shoes, feeling what he would feel, maybe getting outraged at how humans could build a system that's so cruel. By this point, I mean, some people might have empathy for him. And then suddenly reality hits and those emotions get flipped completely on their head. The way I wrote it into the script is that I used the taped footage of Underwood describing what he did.
What did she say when you hit her?
That's something that's, haunted me ever since it happened. She started yelling, "I'm sorry." Which, I'm just like, what is she sorry for? She didn't do anything wrong. It's me, I'm the one that should be sorry.
When you hear that, anybody who had any empathy for Underwood is suddenly stripped of that, and they're now forced to question, maybe he does deserve this. That clash between empathy and the sheer horror of what this guy did makes this moment incredibly powerful. And you can see the effect that this had on the people who watched this video. There's some people that are conflicted but still lean into saying that the death penalty is wrong. There's some people saying that people like this deserve no mercy, that the death row penalty is too kind to them, that Underwood got the chance to make his final statement and the last words of his victim was, "I'm sorry." She never got to choose her last meal. She never got to say goodbye to her family. And so yeah, this video is an emotional roller coaster. But bringing this back to making YouTube videos, I could have written this video in any number of ways. I could have spent hours tweaking the sentences to make them sound more dark and dramatic, but honestly, there's no writing choice that would have held a candle to structuring the video in this way. This is something a lot of writers and a lot of YouTubers struggle with. Is they think the way they write is going to create their emotion, but they end up overlooking the power of structure when it can be just as powerful a narrative tool as language itself. And finally, let's see what happens at the end of this video.
What Underwood did was wrong beyond description. Perhaps you believe he no longer deserves his life.
No, I know what I did was wrong, and I know that I deserve to be punished for it.
But do we as a society deserve to take it?
So the video ends here, and it's only at this moment in the video where I injected an opinion, if you can even call it that, because the opinion is what Underwood did is wrong beyond description. Honestly, I don't think that's a controversial statement. Either way, we reinforce this opinion with words from Underwood himself. He says, "I know what I did was wrong, and I know that I deserve to be punished for it." So here what I'm doing is adding this theme of right and wrong. And then the video closes with a line of narration. Perhaps you believe he no longer deserves his life, but do we as a society deserve to take it? So after 20 minutes going through this really horrible emotional roller coaster, we end the video with a question. And this does three things. We don't end the video by moralizing. Instead, we just ask an open-ended question, which doesn't take a stance. Secondly, it's a question at the end of a very emotionally intense, polarizing video. So it's basically an invitation for people to comment their opinions. But it's the third thing that's really the most important. And it's that this question is philosophical. It's basically another version of the question, is the death penalty right and wrong? And after everything the viewer just saw, it invites them to examine themselves. It leaves them thinking. And so honestly, I think that's the real lesson. If your videos can have a profound effect on the people who watch them, then the videos you make go from being just content to being art. And every single creative choice behind this video, whether it was the structure or the writing or the visuals, which the guys at Cypher are absolute geniuses, shout out to them, was made with the purpose of making this video something truly special. And that is what a great YouTube video looks like. So yeah, this is what I do. I help people make YouTube videos. If you want to make videos of this caliber that perform well and grow your channel, you can find out more about what we do in the top link in the description. So go check that out. And if you want to keep learning more about script writing, last week I released a video about the 9 fundamental principles of a great YouTube documentary. It reinforces a lot of the things that I showed you here in practice and also gives you the theory around why they work. So if you want to check that out, click this thumbnail on screen and you can watch it right now.